In this section of the course, we're going to look a little bit more at PHP and how we control records in the database. In particular, I want to look at how we create, we read or retrieve, how we update, and how we delete records. Now, before we delve into those four areas, the first thing we need to do is actually connect to the database. And if you recall from section 1, we did that with the quick win. Now, I want to look at that in a little bit more detail. So let's just pop back and have a look at the quick win. We can see that the connection part is this bit here. So let me go ahead and create a new section. So over here, I'm going to right click, create a new folder, call this section 3. And in section 3, I'm going to create a second folder. And this second folder, I'm going to call www. And the reason I'm doing that, I'm trying to replicate what would happen in a live environment. Now, if you do have your own server, if you're on something like cPanel, etc., you'll see that when you're given access, you get access to a root folder. And in that folder, you will have probably a www folder or a public HTML folder, and that's the one that is front facing. Now, what we shouldn't do is store any database credentials in that front facing folder. They should be in our root folder so the public can't get access to them. Now, believe it or not, even though this is a PHP file and it should be fairly secure and we shouldn't see this, for example, the username and password, sometimes the server can fail. I've had it happen to me once, and the username and password can actually be viewed online. So we don't want that to happen. So in section 3, I'm going to imagine that this is a folder that the public can't actually see. They can't get to that. And I'm going to create a new file in there. And this is where I'm going to store my database configuration. So I'm going to call it db_config.php. There's that file created. So I'll go back to quick win and I'll just copy this section here and we'll just pop that in. So if you recall, we started with our database host and that was localhost. We're on the same server. I said we could use an IP address in there. We've got the database name, which currently is company. I'm going to change that to MySQL because that's the last one we were working on. The database username was root and the password was blank. Now, we would never leave a password blank. Indeed, I probably wouldn't even use the username root. So in phpMyAdmin, I'm going to go to the MySQL database. And what I want to do is to create a user specifically for this database. So I'm going to go to privileges. I can see the root user here. Well, I'm going to add a new user. Okay, the username, I'll just call it Patrick. The host will be localhost. And the password, well, I can actually generate a password here. So I'll just copy that. And before I forget it, I'll go across to here. And the password, I'll just paste in here. Change that username to Patrick. Let's go back to here. So everything's set up on here. Create database with the same name? No. Grants all privileges? No. Grants all privileges on the database MySQL? No, I don't want to grant all privileges. What I want to do in terms of the data is the user can select the data, they can insert, update, and delete. I don't want them to affect any of the structure of the database. In other words, can they add new fields? No. Or indeed administer the database. So let's click on Go. Okay, so now we've added that new user. Let's go back to phpMyAdmin. So now that I've created my db_config file, I know I can actually connect to the database. What I want to do next is actually show some records from the database, just test things a little bit. So in my www folder, I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call it create.php. This is where I'm going to insert some new records into the database. So there's my new file. Now, before I create some new records, I just want to test that everything is working. So PHP. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to my quick win. And I'm going to grab this query. So all the way down there, let's copy that. And we'll just paste it in here. Now, remember, we set a query. we put it equal select star from users. That will select all the records from the users table. Now, because we're using the MySQL table, so the MySQL database rather, we have two tables in there, the pupils and the teachers. So let me just pull all the records from the teachers. So that has set the query. And then what we want to do, we want to run that query. And we're storing those that query results into this variable here, results. So we're grabbing the connection to the database. We're running a query. The query we're running is this one here. Then we're setting the database connection to null. So we're closing the database connection. And then we're going to loop through and present some results. And the results we're going to present is the email address of each of those staff members. Now this actually won't work. So if I go across and have a look, we've got section 1 and section 3. You might need to do a quick refresh. Click in section 3. In section 3, we've got that dbconfig file. And if you recall, that will be hidden. That is not front facing. But the www folder is our front facing folder. And in there, we've got create.php. And if I click on that, we get undefined variable db connection. That's because that file does not know currently about the connection details. So we need to tell it where to grab that information. So in here, we need to require once. And what do we need to require? Well, we need to require this dbconfig file. Now the dbconfig file is one folder back. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, go back one folder and then grab the dbconfig.php file. We'll save that. Go into here and refresh. And there we have the list of email addresses. So just as a quick recap, we have created a new section. We've created a www folder, which is our public facing folder. And within that, we've created a little file called create.php. Now, currently, what we've put in there is just a quick query just to pull some records to show that things are working. So we're going to remove that from there in the next lesson. And we also created a dbconfig file, which stores all the details of our login for our database. It actually then connects to that database. So in the next lesson, we're going to look at how we can actually insert records.